In Book of Judges. We'll be in chapter 7, where we're picking up where we left off. Does anybody have any questions or comments about what we read so far? Because right now we're getting into Gideon. And we know that the judges that throughout time, they're kind of the leaders throughout Israel that God rises up. Because we notice there's a kind of like a common thing that keeps, it's like almost like a rut that the Israelites get into. They drift from God. They do some evil things inside. A judge comes in, judge delivers them from their enemies, but also reveals to them that you might want to be following God. So they get back on track. But once that judge passes away, there's a little period there where they drift off again, doing more evil than they were before, and then another judge comes in. So we heard about Deborah. We also talked about Shamgar, and then also, I can't really think that's about it. And Othniel. That's about the three we got covered so far. Now we're gotten to Gideon. And Gideon, I like Gideon a lot because he's very interesting in how he does things. Like, well, for one, he wants to be sure that it's him. He don't want to be like, God, are you sure? He wants to be. He's not questioning God, and how what we probably need to take examples from is like, God, is this what you want me to do? Not, can you sure you can do this? No, he's like, God, I know you can do this. Is this sure what you want me to do? So he has different things, and God reveals it to him, does these little small miracles. The most recent one that he did was the sign of the fleece. And he asked one time, he's like, God, could you, if you really want me to do this, how about you keep the ground around it dry and let the fleece be wet? And he needs some double confirmation, some reassurance. It's like, okay, I know you're probably, please be patient with me. But how about you keep the fleece dry and let the dew be around it? And God does that, and so it really confirms it to him. Does anybody have any questions or comments about anything so far?
You're right. He wanted to be sure.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't that he was questioning the father God had, but he wanted to be sure that God was going to.
Amen. It's different than how Moses did this. Moses was trying to get out of it in a way. Gideon was like, are you sure you want me to do this? Because God didn't say, God didn't get angry at him. God didn't have his anger aroused. And God's like, okay, well, I'll show you again. God's like, I'll be patient with you. You want to be sure that that's you and not you're not being tricked or fooled or anything like that. And sure enough, and he confirms that. So now we're in chapter 7, verse 1. It says, then Jerubbaal, that is Gideon, and all the people who were with him rose early and encamped beside the well of Herod. So that the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by the hill, the Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people who are with you are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hands, lest Israel claim glory for itself again against me, saying, my own hands have saved me. So here, we kind of know where this story is going. But God is kind of like, hold on. I'm gonna have to work my ability to show you what I can do, because if not, y'all going to overcome them. I'm going to deliver them in your hands, and then there's so many of y'all. There's a hey, we did it by ourselves. Hey, ah. And so he's like, no, we're gonna cut down the numbers a little bit. We're gonna start sending people home. If we're gonna make this party a little smaller than what we're gonna do. So he goes on with this. He says, now therefore proclaim in the hearing of the people, saying, whoever is fearful and afraid, let him turn and depart at once from Mount Gilead. And 22,000 people returned, which is a lot. And 10,000 remained. So he had 32,000 troops right there. That gives you a number. So 22,000 went home. And so he's like, if you're afraid and you don't feel like you really want to fight, I'd advise you just turn back. And 22,000 is like, don't ask me twice. And they left. So now we're down to 10,000 remaining. But the Lord said to Gideon, the people are still too many. Bring them down to the water, and I will test them for you there. Then it will be that of whom I say to you, this one shall go with you, the same shall go with you. And of whomever I say to you, this one shall not go with you, the same shall not go. So he brought the people down to the water. And the Lord said to Gideon, everyone who laps from the water with his tongue as a dog laps, you shall set apart by himself. Likewise, everyone who gets down on his knees to drink, putting their hands to their mouth, was 300 men. And all the rest of the people got down on their knees and to drink water. So he's determining how he's saying, okay, it's how they're going to drink their water is how I want you to pick them. So apparently a whole bunch of them was drinking like a bunch of animals, and the rest of them were like, we're going to scoop this up and drink it like this, and only 300 of them was doing this. Guess which number God's going to pick? He's going to pick the 300. So, all right, where was I? So it says, verse 7 says, "Then the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and deliver the Midianites to your hands." So 300. All the other 9,700 men he sent home because that was a lot of people drinking like an animal, and then only 300 of them just like, I'm gonna scoop this up and drink this. God obviously picked the smallest number just to show that he's still in control and that he still works. He still works miracles. He still shows the Israelites that he is God and he could do things, and that's what he's doing here. So I'll repeat. It says, "The Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and deliver the Midianites to your hand. Let all the other people go, every man to his place." So the people took provisions and their trumpets in their hands, and he sent away all the rest of Israel, every man to his tent, and retained those 300 men. Now the camp at Midian was below him in the valley. It happened on the same night that the Lord said to him, "Arise, go down against the camp, where I have delivered it into your hand. But if you are afraid to go down to the camp of Purah, your servant, and you shall hear what they say, and afterwards your hand shall be strengthened to go down against the camp." He went down with Purah, his servant, to the outposts of the armed men who were in the camp. Now the Midianites, the Amalekites, and all the people of the east were lying in the valley as numerous as locusts, and their camels were without number, as the sand of the seashore in the multitude. So that's a lot of people. That's a big army they're facing up against. And when Gideon had come, there was a man telling a dream to his companion, and he said, "I have had a dream. To my surprise, a loaf of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian. It came to a tent and struck it so that it fell and overturned, and the tent collapsed. And his companion answered and said, This is nothing else but the sword of the Gideon, the son of Joshua, the man of Israel. And to his hand God has delivered Midian and the whole camp." And so it was, when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and its interpretation, that he worshipped. He returned to the camp of Israel and said, "Arise, for the Lord has delivered the camp of Midian into your hands." So in this case here, God didn't even send him the dream. He's like, "Go down and listen." One of his servants had the dream, and he heard it from him.
Yeah. It's amazing to me.
Mm-hmm.
He used the enemy to interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
For Gideon to hear.
Uh-huh. Exactly. Exactly. And so now, and the Lord told him it's going to strengthen, it's going to bring it. Sure enough, he's like, "You know what? I'm ready to rock and roll." So he's going to gather everybody, and they're going to go down. So verse 16 says, "He divided 300 men into 3 companies, so 100 per company. And he put a trumpet to every man's hand with empty pitchers and torches, and inside the pitchers, and he said to them, Look at me and do likewise. Watch, and when I come to the edge of the camp, shall do as I do. When I blow the trumpet, I and all who are with me, then you also blow the trumpets on every side of the whole camp, and say, The sword of the Lord is and of Gideon." So Gideon and the 100 men who were with him and came to the outpost of the camp at the beginning and the middle of the watch, just as they had posted the watch, and they blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers that were in their hands. And the 3 companies blew the trumpets and broke the pitchers in their hands. And they held the torches in their hands, and the trumpets in the right hand were blowing, and they cried, "The sword of the Lord and of Gideon." And every man stood in his place all around the camp, and the whole army ran and cried out and fled. When 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword against his companion throughout the camp, and the army fled to Beth Achaia towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel Maola Batabeth. And the men of Israel gathered together from Naphtali, Asher, and Manasseh, and pursued the Midianites. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all the mountains of Ephraim, saying, "Come down against the Midianites, and seize from them the watering places as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan." And then all the men of Ephraim gathered together and seized the watering places as far as Beth Barah and the Jordan. And they captured 2 princes of the Midianites, Oreb and Zeb. They killed Oreb at the rock of Oreb, and Zeb they killed at the winepress of Zeb. They pursued Midian and brought the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon on the other side of the Jordan. So once again, God worked God told him, it's like, hey, you're going to be okay. I'm going to deliver them to your hand. And sure enough, that's what he does. I don't think they really even fought. They just all fled because they surrounded them. I guess more or less scared them to death, and they ran. And God's like, I'm delivering them to your hand. And sure enough, he sends messengers throughout the rest of the areas like, hey guys, take these areas. Right now they're weak. Get them. And sure enough, they do that and they conquer. So Lord blessed them and showed them that as long as they do it His way, everything's going to be okay. And it shows it time and time again. As long as they do it His way, the way He wants them to do things, and as long as they follow His will, it's okay. But once again, just like every other human being, we forget, we drift, we get distracted, and sure enough, we're veering off to the left or the right or the left, and doing all sorts of manner of things. Does anybody have any questions or comments about what we read so far? Okay, we'll continue on in chapter 8. Now the men of Ephraim said to him, why have you done this to us by not calling us when you went to fight with the Midianites? And they reprimanded him sharply. So obviously they're like, why didn't you come and get us? They're like, why didn't you just come and get us? And we could have ended this right there. And I think he's about to explain. So he said to them, what have I done now in comparison with you? Is not the gleaning of the grapes of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer? God has delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Zeb. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? Then their anger toward him subsided when he said that. When Gideon came to the Jordan, he and 300 men who were with him crossed over, exhausted but still in pursuit. Then he said to the men of the Succoth, please give loaves of bread to the people who follow me, for they're exhausted, and I am pursuing Zebah and Zalmunna, kings of Midian. And the leader of Succoth said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in your hand, that we should give bread to your army? So Gideon said, for this cause the Lord has delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, and I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. Then he went up from there to Peniel and spoke with him in the same way. And the men of Peniel answered him as the men of Succoth had answered. So he also spoke to the men of Peniel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will tear down this tower. Now Zebah and Zalmunna were at Karkor, and their armies with them, about 15,000. So 15,000 versus 300. All who were left of all the armed people of the east, for 120,000 men, drew the sword and fallen. Then Gideon went up by the road of those who dwell in the tents of the east of Nobah and Jagabah, and he attacked the army while the camp felt secure. When Zebah and Zalmunna fled, he pursued them and took the two kings of Midian, Zebah and Zalmunna, and routed the whole army. Then Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from battle from the ascent of Heres, and he caught a young man of the men of Succoth and interrogated him. And he wrote down for him the leaders of the Succoth and his elders, 77 men. And then he came to the men of Succoth and said, here are Zebah and Zalmunna, about whom you were to kill me, saying, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna are now in your hand, that we should give bread to your weary men. And he took the elder cities and thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them taught the men of Succoth. Then he tore down the tower of Peniel and killed the men of the city. And he said to Zebah and Zalmunna, what kind of men were they whom you killed at Tabor? So they answered, as you are, so were they. Each one resembled the son. Then he answered, they were my brothers, the sons of my mothers. As the Lord lives, if you had let them live, I would not kill you. And he said to Jether, his firstborn, rise, kill them. But the youth would not draw his sword, and was afraid because he was still a youth. So Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise yourself and kill us, for as a man is, so is his strength. So Gideon rose and killed Zebah and Zalmunna, and took the crescent ornaments that were on their animals, and took the crescent ornaments that were on their camels' necks. So that's kind of the situation there. So they were pursuing them. They stopped a couple places to get bread. They refused to give them bread, is what it really boils down to. And he's like, okay, well, I'll come back, and once I have them tied up like you asked for, you're not going to like it. So sure enough, that's what he does. And then he also gets rid of Zebah and Zalmunna. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that so far? Learn anything new? Okay. Well, we'll get down to where he talks about his ephod. Verse 22. The men of Israel said to Gideon, "Rule over us, both you and your son, and your grandson also, for you have delivered us from the hand of Midian." But Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, nor shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you." So it was almost like a foreshadow of what they're going to ask later, because they're almost asking, "Well, be our king." They didn't say that technically, but in a way, they're like, "Just rule over all of us; it'll be fine." And he says, "Then you have a descendant and a whole line of family." And then Gideon's like, "No, no, no, no. Let the Lord rule over you. I don't think I'm fit for that authority," is what he's more or less saying. Let the Lord rule over you. In which that's what Israel's been led this whole time. God would place someone to speak for him and to guide the people, but in the end, God would be leading them. And that's what Gideon tells us, like, let God rule over you. And so, verse 24 says, "Then Gideon said to them, I would like to make a request to you that each of you would give me the earrings from his plunder. For they had gold earrings because they were Ishmaelites." So verse 25 says, "So they answered, we will gladly give them. And they spread out a garment, and each man threw into it the earrings from his plunder. Now the weight of the gold earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, besides the crescent ornaments, pendants, and purple robes, which were on the kings of Midian, and besides the chains that were around their camels' necks." And then Gideon said to, Then Gideon made it into an ephod and set it up in a city, Ophrah. And all Israel played harlot with it there, and became a snare to Gideon and to his house. This Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, so they lifted their heads no more, and the country was quiet for 40 years in the days of Gideon. So after he says that, he's like, "All right, guys, let's throw this. Let's all make an ephod." And sure enough, it didn't take long, and that became a snare to him even. So what happened was, I don't know what they did with it. I'm sure they probably worshipped it or something, or possibly even Gideon himself. But it was kind of sad, really. I do have a little side note here, is like Butt talks about. So this is certainly a sad end to Gideon's influence, as he, perhaps in expression of pride, sought to lift himself up in the eyes of the people. Gideon intended nothing more than to make a breastplate as David did, to indicate civil but priestly rule. It was never intended to set up an adulterous worship, but to be a symbol of civil power. That no evil was intended can be noted from subduing the Midian, quietness from wars, the fact that adultery came after Gideon's death, as well as condemnation for Gideon. So this became a snare for Gideon. In a way, it is a sad end for Gideon. Like, you follow God up to this point, and I'm sure somewhere along the way, pride or something got him. He became a snare, and they started playing the harlot, no longer following God as they should, with this act here. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that? It's like a breastplate kind of thing. I think the priests wear them, like the actual priests. They made their ephods back in the wilderness and things like that. It's like almost like a big robe kind of thing. It's kind of like a symbol, like say, hey, you're a priest. You're the one that goes inside the holies of holies and talks to them, kind of thing. That's what that is. So he makes one, and I guess in a gesture to, show that, hey, he's being a priest, but that became a snare to him and the people of Israel.
He didn't wear it as he put it in the city.
Yeah, he did put it in the city.
Mm-hmm. It became a symbol, and then it became something more.
Started to worship, yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. He did the right thing where he said, he wouldn't rule over them, but God ruling over them. Mm-hmm. And God blessed him during those, I think, 40 years of
mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. But his 7 sons, Abimelech, of course, mm-hmm. He's one of the sons. But then there were issues.
Oh yeah, I think maybe at first they may have seen it was as a symbol of like civil. He put it up as, hey, this is what we made from them. This is what God. But I'm pretty sure probably somewhere along the way somebody's like, let's worship that.
Yeah. The ephod was for, I think, the priests.
Mm-hmm. Originally. And I'm sure the Levites may still have them at that time and still probably use them. But reason why Gideon made one, he could it could have been just a symbol was what he was trying to do. Like what it said there, symbol show that, hey, I made an ephod. You know, this is maybe a reminder of God, but I think somewhere along the way it got twisted, and he himself got snared up in it as well. So sometimes it's easy to get snared up in that stuff. Poor Gideon is a prime example.
Sometimes people have a habit of doing things like that. Something it's very sacred and good that God has ordained, and that they can begin to do use other things.
Pervert it.
Originally, the ephod, I guess, was mostly for the food. Must have been a very chemical type thing, a lot of jewelry and whatever.
Well, I'm sure either I don't think they may not have melted down any of those earrings. They may have just hung them up on there, and then those ornaments or whatever. And I'm sure that those ornaments may have symbols of other gods on them. Who knows? I don't know what they would represent. But it's quite interesting. But it became a snare to them. Now we're going to talk about the death of Gideon. Verse 29 says, Then Jerubbaal, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. Gideon had 70 sons, that's a lot of sons, who were his own offspring, for he had many wives. And his concubine, who was in Shechem, also bore him a son whose name he called Abimelech. Now Gideon, the son of Joash, died at the good old age, and was buried in the tomb of Joash's father in Ephraim of the Aberzites. So it was, as soon as Gideon was dead, the children of Israel again played the harlot with the Baals, and made Baal-berith their god. Thus the children of Israel did not remember the Lord their God, who had delivered them from the hands of all their enemies on every side, nor did they show kindness to the house of Jerubbaal, Gideon, in accordance with the good he has done for Israel. So, once again, it's a sad end for them, really, is that once he makes this ephod and they started playing harlot, he dies. Well, they don't show any kindness to him and his household either. And so it just kind of spiraled out of control, really. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that? Because we're about to talk about, well, one of Gideon's sons, Abimelech's. I can't say his name. Abimelech? Yeah. Does anybody have questions or comments? Mm-hmm. 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 I mean, it is sad, and it's like, well, something shiny. Check it out, and sure enough, it's what it was. And also for Gideon too, if you notice, he had like so many wives and concubines. He had a big polygamy thing as well, so he fell into that, and that didn't fare well for him either. And it's kind of like a domino effect. Once he did that, it's like almost everything else fell into place, and it's caused a lot of issues in the end. But now we're going to get an Abimelech's situation. Then Abimelech, the son of Jerubbaal, or Baal, went to Shechem to his mother's brothers, and spoke with them, and with all the family of the house of mother's father, saying, Please speak in the hearing of the men of Shechem, which is better for you, and all the 70 of the sons of Jerubbaal reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember that I am your own flesh and bone. And his mother's brothers spoke all these words concerning him in the hearing of the men of Shechem, and their heart was inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, He is our brother. So they gave him 70 shekels of silver from the temple of Baal-berith, with which Abimelech hired worthless and reckless men, and they followed him. Then he went to his father's house at Ophrah, and killed his brothers and the 70 sons of Jerubbaal on one stone. But Jotham, the youngest son of Jerubbaal, was left because he hid himself. And all the men of Shechem gathered together, all of Beth-millo, and they went and made Abimelech king beside the terebinth tree at the pillar that was in Shechem. So, in a way, Abimelech, far as I understood, he tricks his brothers, and this side the other say, "Hey, we're flesh and bone. You guys follow me." And then he goes and hires people that I'm assuming murderers, probably criminals, and like, "Okay, guys, let's go do this." And sure enough, he gathers them together. He kills them all in one place, except for one because he hit himself. And they decide, "Hey, we're gonna make you king." And sure enough, they're making him king. Now we're about to get into a parable of trees. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that so far?
They were all his half brothers.
Yep.
He was born with a half brother.
Mm-hmm.
So there were probably some issues between them before.
Mm-hmm.
But he wiggled his way into that and then got rid of them.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, he had a plan. Obviously, he was because I'm sure he probably knew that his father was offered, "Hey, won't you lead us? Be like our king?" And he turns him down. Well, him being the son of Gideon, he may be able to pull something like that. And sure enough, he tries, and sure enough, they make him a king underneath the terebinth tree at the pillar. But now we're getting the parable of trees. In verse 7 says, "Now when they told Jotham, he went and stood at the top of Mount Gerizim, and lifted his voice and cried out, and he said to them, Listen to me, men of Shechem, that God may listen to you. The trees once went forth to anoint a king over them, and they said to the olive tree, Reign over us. But the olive tree said to them, Should I cease giving my oil, with which they honor God and men, and go to sway over trees? And the tree said to the fig tree, Come and reign over us. But the fig tree said to them, Should I cease my sweetness and good fruit, and go to sway over trees? And the tree said to the vine, Come and reign over us. And the vine said to them, Should I cease my new wine, which cheers both God and men, and go to sway over trees? Then all the trees said to the bramble, You come and reign over us. And the bramble said to the trees, If in truth you anoint me as king over you, then come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, let fire come out of the bramble and devour the cedars of Lebanon. Now therefore, if you have acted in truth and sincerity in making Abimelech king, and if you have dwelt with Jeroboam and his house, you have done to him as he deserves. For my father fought for you and risked his life and delivered you out of the hand of Midian. But you have risen up against my father's house this day and killed his 70 sons on one stone, and made Abimelech, the son of his female servant, king over the men of the Shechem, because he is your brother. If then you acted in truth and sincerity with Jeroboam and with his house this day, then rejoice in Abimelech, and let him also rejoice in you. But if not, let fire come from Abimelech, and devour the men of Shechem and Beth Millo. And let fire come from the men of Shechem and Beth Millo, and devour Abimelech. And Jotham ran away and fled, and he went to Beer, and dwelt there for fear of Abimelech his brother. So here he kind of tells him a little parable, and then he's like, sure enough, if you acted in truth and sincerity like you should have treated my father, then rejoice and let him enjoy you and you enjoy him. But if not, there's going to be destruction. And that's what it pretty much really boiled it down to for them. Does anybody have any questions or comments about that little parable he said? All right, we'll continue on to 22. This is where we actually talk about the downfall of Abimelech. After Abimelech had reigned over Israel 3 years, God sent a spirit of ill will between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. And the men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the crime done to the 70 sons of Jerubbaal might be settled, and their blood be laid on Abimelech their brother, who killed them, and on the men of Shechem who aided him in the killing of his brothers. And the men of Shechem set men in ambush against him at the tops of the mountains, and they robbed all who passed by them on the way. And it was told Abimelech. Now Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brothers and went over Shechem, and the men of Shechem put their confidence in him. So he went out into the fields and gathered grapes for the vineyards, and trod them, and made merry, and went into the house of their God, and ate and drank, and cursed Abimelech. And then Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, Who is Abimelech, and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is he not the son of Jerubbaal, and is not Zebul his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, but why should we serve him? If only this people were under my authority, then I would remove Abimelech. So he said to Abimelech, Increase your army and come out. Then Zebul, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed. His anger was aroused, and he sent messengers to Abimelech secretly, saying, Take note, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brothers have come to Shechem, and here they are, fortifying the city against you. Now therefore get up by night, you and the people who are with you, and lie and wait in the field. And it shall be as soon as the sun up is up in the morning, that you shall rise and rush upon the city. And when he and the people who are with him come out against you, you may then do to them as you find opportunity. So Abimelech and all the people who were with him rose by night and lay in wait against Shechem in 4 companies. And Gal, the son of Ebed, went out and stood at the entrance of the city. And Abimelech and the people who were with him rose from lying in wait. And when Gal saw the people, he said to Zebulun, Look, the people are coming down from the tops of the mountains. But Zebulun said to him, You see the shadows of the mountains, as if they were men. So Gal spoke again and said, See, people are coming down from the center of the land, and another company is coming from the diviner's terebinth tree. The Zebulun said to him, Where indeed is your mouth now, with which you said, Who is Abimelech, when we should serve him? Are not these people who you despise? Go out, if you will, and fight with them now. So Gal went out, and leading the men of Shechem, and followed Abimelech. And Abimelech chased him, and he fled from him, and many fell wounded to the very entrance of the gate. Then Abimelech dwelt at Aram. Then Zebulun drove out Gal and his brothers, so that they should not dwell in Shechem. And it came about the next day that the people went out into the field, and they told Abimelech. So he took his people and divided them into 3 companies, and lay in wait in the field. And he looked, and there were people coming out of the city, and he rose against them and attacked them. Then Abimelech and the company that was with him rushed forward and stood at the entrance of the gate of the city. And the other 2 companies rushed upon all who were in the fields and killed them. So Abimelech fought against the city all that day, and he took the city and killed the people who were in it. And he demolished the city and sowed it with salt. When all the men of the tower of Shechem had heard that, they entered the stronghold temple of the god Berith. I think it's Baal Berith. And it was told Abimelech that all the men of the tower of Shechem were gathered together. Then Abimelech went up Mount Zalem, he and all the people who were with him. And Abimelech took an axe in his hand and cut down a bow from the trees, and took it and laid it on his shoulders. And he said to the people who were with him, What have you seen me do? Make haste and do what I have done. So up at this point, he's out there, he's kind of conquesting, from what I'm understanding. And he's just kind of going along. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of these things? Alright, we'll continue right along then. So 49, so each of the people likewise cut down his own bow and followed Abimelech, put them against the stronghold, and set the stronghold on fire above them, so that the people of the tower of Shechem died, about 1,000 men and women. And Abimelech went to Thebez, and he camped against Thebez and took it. But there was a strong tower in the city, and all the men and the women, all the people of the city fled there and shut themselves in, that they went up to the top of the tower. So Abimelech came as far as the tower and fought against it, and he drew near the door of the tower to burn it with fire. But a certain woman dropped an upper millstone, on Abimelech's head and crushed his skull. Then he called quickly to the young man, his armor bearer, and said to him, Draw your sword and kill me, lest men say of me, A woman killed him. So this young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw Abimelech was dead, they departed every man to his place. Thus God repaid the wickedness of Abimelech, which he had done to his father, by killing his 70 brothers. And all the evil men of Shechem, God returned on their own heads, and on them came the curse of Jotham, the son of Jerubbaal. So that was kind of Abimelech's little rule there. So he wasn't king very long, and he conquered a few places here and there, but it was kind of an end that wasn't very honorable. Because once he ended, everybody was like, oh, well, there's no point, and they just left. No one really had the fervor to keep continuing what he was doing. They just kind of departed their own way, and he was more or less forgotten. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that so far?
So he was the last of the family.
Yep.
All of them perished.
Yep. Yes, they did. I think all except for Jotham. I think Jotham's the one that fled and hid. But I think that was only the last son of Gideon. Let me make sure I said that right.
He was one of the 70.
Yeah, he was one of the 70 when Abimelech went and killed all of them. He was the only one that hid. And then he fled. I believe it was... Hold on. Let me make sure I got it right. Yeah, Jotham, the youngest of Jeroboam, had left because he hid himself, and then after he does the parable, he flees and goes to another place, and not that's all it really says about Jotham, really. So Jotham's the last one. So all of them, but Jotham is the last one, as far as I can see. And then I think that's it for Abimelech and Gideon, really. Does anybody have any questions or comments about any of that so far?
He was the one that told the parable.
Yeah, he was the one that told the parable. Yes, sir. All right, we're about to get into Tola, and that's chapter 10. Now, I think we come across a couple that they don't have a big significant time frame, but we'll get into those. So we'll start on Tola. It says, after Abimelech there arose to save Israel Tola, the son of Puah, the son of Dodo, a man of Escar, and he dwelt in Shamir in the mountains of Ephraim. He judged Israel 23 years, and he died and was buried in Shamir. After him rose Jair, a Gileadite, and he judged Israel 22 years. Now he had 30 sons who rode on 30 donkeys. They also had 30 towns, which were called Havoshar to this day, which are in the land of Gilead. And Jair died and was buried in Canaan. So that was two right there. They ruled for about 45 years between the two. They were, Israel 45 years had a judge, and so they did their thing, and they must not have done anything super significant. I'm sure that there may be some things in there they done that was not written. Like God's like, hey guys, you need to set your direction, and I'm sure that they kept Israel where it needs to go. But in verse 6, and the children of Israel again did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served the Baals and the Ashtoreths, the gods of the Syria, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of people of Ammon, and the gods of the Philistines. And they forsook the Lord and did not serve him. So they have a whole bunch of gods they started. they had options. They had a bunch of gods that started serving. And they were doing, once again, evil inside the Lord. Once all this stuff goes on, once they have these judges, and the judges set them straight, and it's like, God, listen to what God says. God is wanting us to do this. This is what we need to do. And they do it, but until they die, and then they forget, and then they're like, okay, we got a bunch we could pick from, and sure enough, that's what they're doing. Verse 7, so the anger of the Lord was hot against Israel, and he sold them to the hands of the Philistines and to the hands of the people of Ammon. From that year, they harassed and oppressed the children of Israel for 18 years. All the children of Israel who were on the other side of the Jordan in the land, the Amorites and Gilead, moreover the people of Ammon, crossed over the Jordan to fight against Judah, also against Benjamin, and against the house of Ephraim. So Israel was severely distressed. And the children of Israel cried out to the Lord, saying, we have sinned against you because we have both forsaken our God and served the Baals. So the Lord said to the children of Israel, did I not deliver you from the Egyptians and from the Amorites and from the people of Ammon and from the Philistines? Also the Sidonians and the Amalekites and the Manites oppressed you, and you cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hand. Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will deliver you no more. Go and cry out to the gods which you have chosen. Let them deliver you in your time of distress. So this is God's response to them. It's like, I have delivered you over and over. It says, did I not, he even brought up Egypt. He's like, did I not bring you out of the land of Egypt? Did I not help you when you was in the wilderness? Did I not help you conquer these lands? Did I not help you deliver you from your enemies once you turned away from me then? And this is his response, says, all right, I'm done. You cry to them. And this is kind of like a learning thing for them. In verse 15, and the children of Israel said to the Lord, we have sinned. Do to us whatever seems best to you. Only deliver us this day, we pray. So they put away the foreign gods from among them and served the Lord, and his soul could no longer endure the misery of Israel. So once again, they realize what they're doing, and sure enough, they're like, you know what? We're going to put all this away. We're going to serve God like we're supposed to. And at this point, God's like, I can't stand it anymore. Just like, real honestly, like a father with his own children, really, is like, all right, you did that. You go do that. And sure enough, the child actually did what you taught them to do, and they're still suffering. It's like, okay, let me go help them. That's what he's more or less. He says, they're actually following me again. They're doing what I told them to do before all this. let me go get them. So sure enough, he's like, I can't stand it anymore. So then the people of Ammon gathered together and encamped in Gilead. And the children of Israel assembled together and encamped in Mizpah. And the people of the leaders of Gilead said to one another, who is the man who will begin the fight against people of Ammon? He shall be head over all the inhabitants of Gilead. So that was the situation there, and I'm about to run out of time. Does anybody have any questions or comments about what we read so far?